Hi there. I'm here to present another quarantine quadruple feature. Now, for my two or three faithful followers, you might be thinking it's Friday. You do these on Saturdays, and it's true, I do. But Gina had the idea of, hey, for the long weekend for the 4th of July holiday, why don't you do an extra video that's a little bit shorter for the people that are friends with you that don't necessarily want to commit to watching a 15 or 30-minute video of you talking about movies. Maybe you can do maybe like a 5 to 10-minute video and see if that boosts any other interest. And I said, no, that's not what this is. My quarantine quadruple features are every Saturday, and that's just the way it is. And if people don't want to listen to me talk for 30 minutes, then they don't have to, but I'm not going to compromise what I'm doing. And then I thought about it, and then I thought it's actually not a bad idea, and so now I'm filming that while she's gone at work. You may hear a child crying in the backyard, because after I got all nice and set up here at the window, my neighbor started ripping into his daughter, screaming at her. She's probably 5 or 6. He screams at her every day, and once she starts crying, he makes her sit in the backyard by the pool to cry. She doesn't cry in the house, so that way it can just bother all the neighbors, and he can have some peace and quiet. That's what that sound is. It kind of sounds like an animal. It's her. Anyway, so here we are for a special Friday edition of Quarantine Quadruple Feature. Now, in my Quarantine Quadruple Features, every week that a filmmaker has passed away, I've mentioned them, given them a little tribute, talked about them. I didn't mention Joel Schumacher last week. That's because this week I wanted to do a full tribute to the films of Joel Schumacher. So that's actually what we're going to be focusing on today. 4 films by the filmmaker Joel Schumacher, who passed away last week. Now, he has films that are widely considered good movies. They were financially successful. They were critically lauded. Audiences like them. Movies like The Lost Boys, A Time to Kill, The Client. Those are all like objectively good films. He also has films that nobody would really argue are good movies. Unfortunately, his last movie, Trespass, Batman and Robin, The Number 23, got low reviews kind of across the board, weren't wildly successful. Critics and audiences agreed that they didn't really like them very much. He also had films that really straddle the line between popular and not popular. He had movies that are very debated, and I find those movies far more fascinating. So that's what we're going to focus on today. 4 of his movies that really divided audiences, because I think that's just a lot more interesting than talking about like, oh, we're going to look at his bad movies or his good movies or whatever. So we're going to look at 4 movies that, full disclosure, I actually enjoy all 4 of these movies. And then whoever watches this, you're probably going to like some of them, you're probably not going to like some of them, but I think that's what makes a lot of these movies interesting, is how divided they made audiences. So let's start right off the bat with what he's unfortunately forever known for, his Batman films. Now, when he passed away, there was a tribute written by like a major publication that was like, Joel Schumacher, creator of Bat Nipples, dead. And it was just so insulting. I mean, he was a filmmaker that worked in the industry for like 4 decades, entertaining us. He was a philanthropist. He donated thousands of dollars to Democratic campaigns. And then that was all they could think of to say. It was like, shut up. Are you kidding me? Grow up. And the Batman movies are they're such an interesting part of his filmography. First of all, he's a very interesting choice to take on some Batman movies, but I'm glad that he did. I think he did some really interesting stuff. Our first movie we're looking at is Batman Forever. Now, I saw this when it came out in the 90s. I was a preteen. I had a grand old time. This was when Jim Carrey is at the peak of his popularity. I thought he was really funny in it, and just a fantastic choice for like a over-the-top Batman villain. And there are reviews that positively compare it to the Batman series of the 60s, starring Adam West. But I think this goes beyond that. It's not just campy. It is also a fully realized vision. Joel Schumacher does really cool stuff in this movie. He uses extravagant sets. He uses miniatures, matte paintings, models. He uses kind of every filmic device to create an all-encompassing Gotham City. He's not just going to a real big downtown city and filming in real locations, kind of like Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight series did. And also the color palette is fascinating as well. I mean, this is like you're looking at a really colorful comic book. That was what he was trying to do, is kind of make a live action comic book. He didn't want it to be grim and brooding and depressing. He wanted it to be like fun and colorful. And the color palette and the lighting, that was the first time in, I think it was like 96 when this came out, 95, 96. That was the first time that I had ever seen sort of neon saturated scenes like you see in Batman Forever. In fact, it's really popular now. You see it, this type of lighting style used in movies like Blade Runner 2049, Nicholas Winding Refn's Drive, Neon Demon, Only God Forgives. I mean, he basically got his color palette from Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever. And I know that's probably an outrageous claim to some people, and I'm certainly not saying that the movies are comparable, but I am saying that the movie is better than people give it credit for. And of course, people just focus on, like, bat nipples. Tommy Lee Jones in the movie gives such a fun, over-the-top, unrestrained performance that you're not used to seeing Tommy Lee Jones give. He usually does his very quiet, stoic thing, like, we're gonna get that guy. You know, like he won the Academy Award for The Fugitive, doing his Tommy Lee Jones thing. So when you see him go beyond that into, like, a crazy realm that you don't see very often, it's really fascinating. He did it in Natural Born Killers. He does it in Batman Forever. He decides people's fate by a flip of the coin, and I think it's so funny that years later he would be playing a sheriff hunting someone, Anton Chigurh, who decides people's fates by a flip of the coin in No Country for Old Men. Nothing in the movie grounded in reality, you know? And we have the Christopher Nolan Batman movies if you want Batman movies that are grounded in reality. And also, anyone arguing like, oh, he drove the Batman movies into the ground, give me a break. There have been like 6 Batman movies since then, not counting the like 20 full-length animated films that have been released straight to DVD. We have more Batman movies on the way. Did they halt production on Batman movies for a few years? I mean, yeah, probably. But who cares? How many Batman movies do we need, honestly? Like, if we have to stop making Batman movies for a few years, I think we'll be okay, because they're never going to stop. And I love the idea of a different director taking up the mantle of a big property and changing from every movie or two to a different director's hands. So, you know, seeing Tim Burton's vision is cool, and then seeing Joel Schumacher's, I think, is cool as well. A different director, seeing their vision of Batman, and a different actor playing Batman. Sometimes you're going to get an unexpected hit. Like, most people probably didn't expect Michael Keaton to be such a kick-ass Batman, but he was certainly a kick-ass Batman. And then some of them are misses, like George Clooney, biggest movie star in the world when Batman and Robin came out. You probably would have thought he'd be a great Batman, and he just wasn't a good Batman. But I think that's interesting, and I think that gives the whole franchise more to talk about. Like, we don't want the same Batman. Actually, fans do just want the exact same thing over and over again. But people who like interesting films and dissecting them for different ways, I'm very glad that the Joel Schumacher Batman films exist, because I think he was doing something interesting, I think he was doing something different, and I think it's something worthwhile. Also, when this came out, when I was seeing trailers and I saw Nicole Kidman, I was like, oh, I was in love. I was like, who is this beauty? I must see this film. So our first movie is going to be Batman Forever. Okay, movie number 2, very controversial one for the times we're in right now. Falling Down. This one actually came out a few years before Batman Forever. Stars Michael Douglas. He's kind of like a pencil-pushing worker who basically snaps. He has a breakdown. He's just sitting in traffic. He can't stand it anymore. He gets out of his car, he leaves, and then basically goes on a crime spree throughout the entire city. This one is very controversial right now. There are basically 2 schools of thought on Falling Down. One is that it is glorifying the type of people who would go shoot up a popular location, the type of person who just snaps and does something terrible. The other school of thought is that it is very clearly a critique of that type of person. And the fights that he fights in this movie after he snaps, the things that he chooses to bust up a store over or shoot up a restaurant about are utterly ridiculous. Like, if this movie came out today, he would be fighting the I'm not gonna wear a mask fight, without a doubt. When you watch this character, he's inane with the things. He gets upset that a Coke costs 85 cents and that the person selling the Coke won't give it to him for 50 cents, so he smashes up the entire store. You're not supposed to watch that and say, yes, he's fighting for what's right, sodas should be 50 cents. That's a ridiculous reason to snap and bust up someone's establishment. He has a restraining order against him put out by his wife. He keeps calling her and stalking her throughout the movie like, I'm coming home, I'm coming back. And it's like very ominous and creepy, and I don't think you watch this movie and think, oh, he's the hero of the movie. Because he's clearly a disturbed, fucked up character in the movie. The other complaint is that, like, oh, well, it's putting you in the shoes of this very toxic character and trying to make you empathize with him. And that's just not that's not a critique that really holds very much water with me. I think a movie, a play, a book can be about characters that we don't want to see in our everyday lives. Characters that we don't necessarily want to learn more about. I mean, you look at like half of the works written by Shakespeare and the characters are terrible people. That doesn't make it any less of a quality production because you don't want to be with Macbeth. You know, it's a complaint that I get it. You don't like the movie for that reason. You don't want to spend that time, and that's your choice. That does not detract from the quality of the movie. And it's a really over-the-top, bizarre movie. There is kind of a subgenre of films of movies that kind of take place over the course of one day and or one night. Movies like Training Day, Scorsese's After Hours, Running Scared with Paul Walker. Those movies, they all go over the top because no one's gonna believe all of those events happen in the course of one day or one night. It's unbelievable. But that's just a piece of suspension of disbelief you'll have to have for any of those types of movies because that's what makes them so fun. The compressed amount of time that it happens in is why it's such a fascinating watch. But I think this one is really interesting, especially for today. I think this one is actually like a really solid movie. Movie number 3. This one was pretty controversial as well. 8mm. This one got very mixed reviews. Basically, not for the quality of the filmmaking, not really for the performances or anything like that. This one got really mixed reviews just purely because of the subject matter. And it's Nicolas Cage, and he's trying to find out if a snuff film actually happened. A snuff film is when someone actually gets killed on camera, and then the tape circulates around with sick people who buy really weird stuff when porn doesn't do it for them. If you've seen Paul Schrader's film Hardcore, where a guy is kind of trying to infiltrate the smut, what's the word? And there's also very interesting performances from Joaquin Phoenix. Speaking of Joaquin Phoenix, if people are going to give Joker a pass for like a white guy snapping, you can't look falling down in the face and say that's a criticism upon you, because that's exactly what Joker was. Nominated for Best Picture, won Best Actor, so don't even pretend like we as a society are above accepting a totally toxic storyline or potentially dangerous storytelling with how we are giving a voice to the voiceless that shouldn't have a voice represented in media. Like, if that's your argument for this movie, take a long, hard look at Joker as well. All right, 8.5, not 8, we are certainly not watching Flinty's 8.5. This 8mm, Nicolas Cage discovering the seedy underbelly of the kind of porn and snuff industry. Joaquin Phoenix plays kind of like a sex shop worker who's helping him. I'm covering the other half because this is a 2-disc set with 8.5. 8.5, God damn it, 8mm 2, which is not a good sequel, but I do enjoy 8mm quite a bit as well. And the main reason I love this movie is it has a pretty big role for James Gandolfini, who is one of my top 5 favorite actors of all time, and cinematically didn't really reach his full potential. He's really great in a lot of movies. He usually has sort of smaller roles, like The Mexican by Gore Verbinski or True Romance, but he always steals the scenes he's in. And I think the work James Gandolfini does is simply astonishing, especially in The Sopranos. I know this is a movie thing, but James Gandolfini's role in The Sopranos is one of the greatest performances of all time. I mean, that thing reaches Shakespearean levels of character complexity and development. It is his work in Sopranos is truly phenomenal if you haven't watched it. I love James Gandolfini. Part of the reason why I love 8mm so much. All right, final movie is another hotly debated one, but I think is actually pretty solid. Phantom of the Opera. This one is sort of debated in the same reason that the Batman films are, is that it was a huge property that people always imagined would be different in their heads, so that they weren't totally satisfied when they saw someone else's vision. Now, I do love Phantom of the Opera. I've seen the show twice, and I thought the movie was good. I enjoyed watching it. This was also kind of heralded the big screen debuts. It wasn't the debut, but it kind of introduced the world to Emmy Rossum, as well as Gerard Butler, who plays the Phantom. They're both really good. They'd both been in a handful of movies, but they hadn't done a big starring vehicle that was on such a grand scale as Phantom of the Opera. But I think this has really lush production design. The music is great, obviously. Solid performances, great costumes, and it's got like a very gothic, nice, spooky atmosphere that Joel Schumacher handled really well. But again, a lot of theater nerds hate this one because it wasn't exactly what they wanted, or non-musical people don't like it, but this one was pretty debated as well when it came out. So those are the four we're going to watch for our Joel Schumacher tribute, who unfortunately lost last week. But we're going to take a look at some of his more debated, potentially controversial films, which I think are infinitely more interesting to discuss. I like the ones that have a little more meat there for debate. So those are the four we're going to watch. I hope you're watching something by Joel Schumacher, remembering all the entertainment he gave us over the 30 plus years that he worked in the industry. Happy 4th of July weekend, and I'll have another video tomorrow. Thanks.